still haunts the halls of a St. Louis mansion.
She told me, well, you've got ghosts in your house, and they don't like me.
In Wyoming, a pioneering woman of the Wild West becomes part of the family, even though she rode off into the sunset decades ago. And a Civil War captain's hospitality travels across time, still entertaining visitors in his 19th century North Carolina home.
I knew immediately that it was the captain. It made chills run up and down my spine.
Unsettling tales from unforgettable old homes. If walls could haunt. Hello, I'm Grant Goody. Welcome to If Walls Could Haunt. There can be something a little frightening about a big, old, empty house. So many memories, so many unexplored spaces. For Sue McCollum of St. Louis, the eerie feeling was there from the very beginning. She swore to her husband that she couldn't imagine moving into a dim and cavernous 1907 mansion, and yet she did. She never shook her chilling first impression of the Missouri mansion, and her instincts proved correct. A series of uncanny events revealed a tale of a broken-hearted father whose spirit may still be searching for a happy ending.
And you'd come into this room, and you had the feeling that when you entered it, you should just check and look around to make sure no one was up here.
Sue McCollum will never forget the unsettling encounter she had the first time she and her husband Todd toured their large St. Louis, Missouri home.
It was not love at first sight.
For Sue, it was fright at first sight. While she checked out a small storage room on the home's third floor, Sue couldn't shake the feeling of a watchful gaze. And when she pulled open one of the drawers, she was met with an eye-opening surprise.
As I opened it, I jumped back because inside the drawer was one of those rugs that has like a lion's head in it. And closed the drawer and walked out of the room and said, that's it, that's it.
Sue was confident she would never step foot in the spooky house again. But she was wrong.
We came back, we said, you know, this house isn't bad. And then we came back again and again and again. And each time we came back, we liked the house more.
6 months later, the family moved in. Sue and Todd liked the fact that their 1907 monster-sized home had pretty much maintained its original feel. But it wasn't until Sue hosted a gathering one evening that she learned from a stranger her house might have also maintained its original occupants.
She said, excuse me, do you believe in ghosts? And I said, well, I'm very open to that. And then she told me, well, you've got ghosts in your house, and they don't like me. And I said, oh, how do you know? And she said, because they're tugging at my ear.
The woman went on to tell Sue that the ghosts were happy children were in the house again, and that the spooky specters wouldn't bother them. The scary revelation prompted Sue to anxiously search the house for clues. She wondered who might be dwelling in the shadows, and why were they haunting her house. Surprisingly, the twisted tale came to light through a book given to Sue by another stranger.
And this book was written about the girl who grew up in the house, Rebecca West.
Rebecca West was a wealthy New York socialite who became estranged from her father, Alan West. Mr. West was deeply saddened that his daughter left home, never to return.
And when you read the book, you all of a sudden thought, that's really all I think Mr. West wanted, was to have his family grow up in this house and be happy.
Sue believes Alan is the home's spirited guest, and Mr. West's unrest is due to his broken heart. Sue and her family also suspect that one of his favorite haunting grounds is the home's third floor.
We think Mr. West is here because we feel his presence, but there's a sense sometimes like he's watching you.
Sue's not the only one who has been spooked by Mr. West. While babysitting, their nanny, Martha Terry, had a late-night rendezvous with Mr. West and his ghoulish guests. One evening, she fell into a trance-like slumber, all the while hearing a group of partiers enter through a side door.
I knew that the presence was in this house because I couldn't move.
Martha struggled to wake herself, and when she did, the house lay dead silent.
There was no one here. And I said, the party is over, guys. I need this job, okay? So you might as well go.
But as the family learned, Mr. West didn't go. They believe he often lingers in the dark third-floor storage room, where evidence of his presence has mysteriously been preserved through several owners and many decades.
Now, I have all the other labels faded, but the one that's prominent and looks as though it was written yesterday is Mr. West's suits.
Sue and her husband left the label and the room undisturbed, hoping their ghostly guest will keep to himself. But when night falls, Sue knows the spirit of Mr. West comes out to roam.
As much as I try not to come up here, I'll be in the laundry room and I'll feel a sense that someone's watching me. And this has happened in my office too. And it's the same kind of feeling that you get when you're in a shopping mall and you think someone's staring at you and you look and you can see the person who's looking at you. But when I turn, I can't see anyone, but I can feel them watching.
For Sue and her family, Mr. West's harmless habits continue to hover in the background of daily life. And although it's a chilling reality living with their formless friend, they're content giving him his own space.
You know, Mr. West can stay in his area of the house and I'll stay in my area of the house and we'll be just fine. It's a little scary sometimes, but that sense that this house is very solid, that it's very safe, is much more overwhelming than the sense that there are ghosts here.
Sue and her husband Todd say they'd come up with a way to appease Mr. West's spirit. Since they feel Mr. West is happy to have children back in the home, the couple decided his room was the perfect place to store their son's artwork and Halloween costumes. Sue says her boys are comfortable in the house. Sometimes she'll find her youngest son, Brian, happily playing in Mr. West's third-floor storage room. When we come back...
There's actually one person in the house. He's not alive.
When Florida homeowners unsealed forgotten doors, windows, and walls in their 1905 house, did they release the spirit of a former resident? There's more to hear if walls could haunt.
Brought to you by Hancock. We're fabrics and so much more.
Want to give your home a new look? Then come to us.
Welcome back to If Walls Could Haunt. Every old house maintains a spirit of its past. Some are warm and inviting. Others are more mysterious. When Michael Drawdy and Lee Bracken found their home in Jacksonville, Florida, it came with a potential for grandeur and an unspoken feeling of lives past. They instantly felt welcomed into the 1905 house, but were surprised when they realized that the friendly spirit they sensed might actually be the ghost of a guy named Frank. In the modern riverside city of Jacksonville, Florida, history sometimes washes away like water under the bridge. But for Lee Bracken and Michael Drawdy, the past is a powerful undercurrent that flows throughout their 1905 home.
An old house actually has its own soul, I think. The house will give you back what it feels on the inside, all of its memories and all of its past.
After they moved in, Lee and Michael were surprised to discover that part of their home's soul was, in fact, a strange presence.
There's actually one person in the house that is, lives here as well, and he's not alive.
The homeowners never suspected that the source of their home's spirit would become crystal clear as they started their extensive restoration. The revelations about their home started with several household discoveries, including needles from a loom found during a bathroom renovation. The items helped Lee and Michael trace the research thread back to their home's first owner, who was a tailor. But the surprises weren't all sewn up yet for Lee and Michael. They think several of their first finds date back to the days when their house served as the Swedish consulate in the 1930s. Among the handy kitchen helpers they found were a Turkish coffee pot and another gourmet gadget.
The expert finally told us that it was a green beaner, and you would put the green beans in this area and turn the crank, and they would come out down here split in half without any seeds, kind of like a French cut green bean would be.
But the discoveries became less concrete and more mysterious for Lee and Michael. And they began to wonder if they were both becoming kind of
A couple times we got the chills when you hear him walking upstairs.
Their suspicions that they had a spirit in the house were confirmed when they made their most shocking discovery deep inside the house. A false wall, which would turn out to be a true opening to the past.
We found that there was actually a door inside the wall, but when we pulled it down, it actually had a little plaque on the door. It said Frank's room, and when you opened the door, there was no room there. That's when we decided, okay, that's what our ghost name is Frank. We opened up Frank's room, Frank came out, and now he's here.
At first, Lee and Michael were unnerved about freeing Frank. But over time, they'd become accustomed to his ghostly presence and even his eerie noises.
Over here.
It was really a strange sound. It was a male voice, kind of like almost childlike male voice. And when the door would swing, it would be sort of like, help me.
Over here.
So we started looking. We went upstairs, we went outside, we went around the block looking for someone yelling, help me.
They finally figured out it was Frank, who they believed was having trouble opening the new swinging door.
You could hear it calling, and we just said, okay, Frank, we know you're in there. What do we need to do to get you out of there? So we kind of left the door open at that point, and he was happy with that.
According to Lee and Michael, their ghostly house guest wanted all the windows open, too.
I mean, you couldn't pry them open or anything. Some of them were nailed shut, some were screwed shut. And one night we came home and it was cold and it was windy out. It was a winter day, and every window in the house upstairs was opened. And all the curtains were blowing in and the wind was blowing.
The feeling got more bizarre for Lee and Michael. After they managed to get all the windows closed again, Lee had another unnerving encounter. A slight nudge from the spooky roommate.
I was coming down the stairs to tell Michael that I had finally closed the window upstairs, and I don't think Frank liked that. And I felt his hand on my back in a way to say, don't close all my windows.
Lee and Michael say the harmless spirit was just trying to make a strong statement. Despite the scare, they actually feel safer having their phantom's presence patrol the house.
Once I thought about it, it's like having a security alarm that you don't have to pay a monthly fee for.
Both Lee and Michael say Frank's friendly spirit has been a breath of fresh air in their old house.
But he is a playful ghost. He's a fun ghost. He's a good ghost.
Lee and Michael have become comfortable with their shadowy specter. But the one mystery they wanted to solve was, who was Frank and why was he there? After doing some research, Lee and Michael believe their ghost may have been a boarder, one who often paid his rent in advance. They suspect since Frank passed away unexpectedly, he's either looking for a refund or he's hanging out because he's already laid out the money. When we come back...
Right as I looked up, it was like somebody was turning to the left to go upstairs.
In a Wyoming Victorian, a young family doesn't just see the spirit of a flamboyant former owner. They adopt her as one of their own. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Grant Goody. What would you do if you believed you had a ghost in your house? Many people would just move out. Cindy Baldwin of Cody, Wyoming, decided to welcome the spirit into her family. She purchased her 1904 Victorian without knowing that it once belonged to one of the town's legendary characters, a pioneering writer named Carolyn Lockhart. Cindy believes the house still belongs to Miss Lockhart, which would make some homeowners run away. But Cindy has wrapped her arms around the spirit of the past.
Carolyn is a ghost that makes fun of things and has a great sense of humor. She's not mean. She doesn't do anything evil. But I think in life, she laughed a lot about life.
Cindy Baldwin appreciates a good joke as much as the next person. So shortly after she purchased her northwestern Wyoming home, she was tickled to learn from neighbors that her home had been built by the town trickster in 1904.
You'll go into rooms and beds will have, like somebody has already sat on the bed. Towels will be moved in the middle of the night. Water will be turned on. Doors will be shut.
Cindy opened the door on her home's history when she moved in. Neighbors told her a rocking chair left in the home once belonged to the home's builder, novelist Carolyn Lockhart. As Cindy unpacked, she found one of the author's novels hiding in a dining room cabinet.
It was one of the first books she wrote called The Lady Doc, which made me start thinking, I need to find out more about this woman, because this is pretty risque for the time in which it was written.
Cindy learned that the book scared up a scandal in 1912 because it centered on an affair between two of Cody's respected figures. It wasn't the first time Carolyn stirred up trouble with her writing. She made a career of exposing the skeletons hiding in people's closets. Before coming to Cody in 1904, Carolyn made a name for herself writing about corruption on the East Coast.
She was way ahead of her time. She was a writer at the turn of the century, editor of the newspaper, and wasn't afraid to speak her mind, so you always knew where you stood with her. If she liked you, you knew it, and if she didn't like you, you knew it.
Cindy was amused by reports that Carolyn shocked Cody's society in the early 1900s with her unconventional lifestyle. And as Cindy unpacked in front of the writer's Victrola, she got a striking sense that Carolyn was still seeking attention.
I was unloading books, and as I was sitting in front of it, I plopped myself on the floor, and the entire door opened up, and you could see how hard it is to open up, and hit me in the back. At which time I said, do you think that means Carolyn liked me? And I thought, yes, it does. She has to like me. And that was the first of the ghostly adventures that I've had with Carolyn.
From her reading on Carolyn's past, Cindy believes the spirit's choice of a musical medium could date back to Carolyn's brief career as a stage actress in the late 1800s. Cindy's daughter, Sarah, grew up with Carolyn's ghost and even witnessed some of her dramatic entrances from beyond the grave.
Once I was playing the piano and I looked up the stairs here and I heard ruffling of the dress. I heard all these little swishing noises and I looked up, and right as I looked up, it was like somebody was turning to the left to go upstairs.
As Sarah and her sister grew up, they became used to the spirit. The family believes Carolyn even picked up after them. They said that after a while, Carolyn became just another member of the Baldwin household.
It's interesting, and when I was younger, it would frighten me, but I think as I got used to it and kept seeing or hearing things, you just get used to it. And it's kind of a comforting feeling after a while, just knowing that somebody else is around.
But this home was not always a place for children. As Cindy studied historic photographs, she learned that Carolyn operated a bar in the home's front parlor. It seems the parties were talked about long after the bar closed. And sometimes, Cindy thinks the open sign is still lit.
At times, the house will be empty, and you'll be sitting out here reading or visiting, and you'll hear the clinking together of glasses, and it just gets really eerie. And if somebody's out here and you're visiting and hear this, the room will go quiet because everybody will hear it. And I'll always jokingly say that's just Carolyn having a party around us.
Carolyn Lockhart maintained a high profile in the Cody community throughout her life. Cindy assumes that her appearances today are just the writer's efforts to stay in the limelight.
I tell people about Carolyn Lockhart, and I think she likes that because she likes to be a center of attention, so I know she's enjoying it. So I think she's getting a big laugh out of the whole thing.
Carolyn's ghost seems to enjoy entertaining on many levels. Guests staying in Cindy's second-floor bedrooms have told her that they've heard dancing on the home's third floor. This is always a surprise to Cindy because she only has a two-story home. It's just one more example of the heights Carolyn will go to get attention. When we come back...
She really doesn't do anything except look at whoever's sleeping in the bed, which is a very odd feeling.
A Mississippi couple didn't really believe in ghosts until they had to share their 1880s home with visions of another family that had once lived in the same rooms. Stay with us.
Brought to you by...
Welcome back to If Walls Could Haunt. People who love old homes know the lives of former residents are part of the fabric of the building. Some even buy old homes in hopes of seeing a ghost or two. When Kay and Joe Adams bought 20 acres along Mississippi's coastline, all they wanted was the old oak trees and the ocean view that went with their 1880s home. But when this Adams family began to encounter strange sights and other twilight tensions, they began to wonder if their decision to buy would come back to haunt them.
We had an artist here painting the mural in the front hallway. And after several trips down on weekends, she told us that unless she could have someone stay with her here, she wasn't coming back anymore.
Scaring people away from their Gautier, Mississippi home was never the intention of Kay Adams and her family. True, ghostly tales have been floating around their sprawling Gulf Coast property for almost 20 years. But at first, the Adams believed the only spirits being raised here were their own.
It's a wonderful place for coffee in the morning and a glass of wine in the afternoon. And you talk about important things like whether the fish are out there or what the weather's going to be like. You know, important things.
When Kay and her husband Joe purchased the 1880s house, the tranquility was a treat. But she wondered if it was some kind of trick when they began to unearth solid evidence of a structure near their serene shoreline.
There are bricks scattered all up and down the beach where when you walk on the beach you see whole bricks, chipped bricks.
And not far from the water's edge, Kay dug up more mysterious finds, like old silverware and a pair of candlesticks. After reading a local history book, Kay learned that before their house was built, guests from a brick hotel had checked in to this same exact site. But one night, they had to quickly check out.
There's a family named McRae, and they lived down the way. They had a hotel here that they had built for people to stay at as they were traveling along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And that hotel was made out of red brick. And it burned down pre-Civil War days. And there are bricks up and down the beach.
Kay had a few reservations knowing a hotel fire took place here. But it helped her realize there was more to her home than met the eye. In the beginning, Kay and her husband dismissed the hallway painter's claim that she had seen a ghost. And even after hearing creaks on the stairs one eerie evening, they still weren't convinced.
We didn't think we had a ghost. We thought we had a burglar. And you feel foolish when you get up and you call the police for a burglar and there's nothing around.
A few nights later, the Adams found themselves staring at the surreal. According to Kay, they were jarred out of slumber at 2 in the morning by their growling dog and phantom footsteps in the hallway.
Immediately I looked toward the stairs to see what child was coming down the steps who had awakened or whatever. And we saw this man walking up the stairs. After that time, there's been too many other circumstances going on that we realized that we do have a guest, and it seems to be here constantly.
Besides the gentleman ghost, who's been seen in every room, Kay was bewitched to discover a young female spirit also in the house.
The teenage ghost had dark hair, done in a page boy cut, kind of like a 20s hairstyle. And she really doesn't do anything except look at whoever's sleeping in the bed, which is a very odd feeling to wake up. But she just looks at you and disappears.
The teenage ghost frequently watches the Adams sleep. While the family has become somewhat accustomed to the apparitions, friends staying in a downstairs bedroom have a harder time sleeping among the ghosts and their nocturnal.
I don't sleep in that room, but it's a guest bedroom. But people, almost everyone who ever stays in that hears footsteps.
Guests claim the footsteps come from an empty second floor. Kay thinks one source of the spooky racket hinges around an upstairs closet.
Now this door has always been a live door. It will open and close on its own. No wind, no anything. Periodically it will open and close at night.
After months of guessing who it could be that was lurking in the shadows, Kay finally came to a conclusion. She felt the apparition responsible for most of the haunting hijinks is a man deeply rooted in the home's past. Henry Gautier, the original owner.
He was in the lumber business, and this house is built from lumber that he cut from his own sawmill.
Gautier's sizable business helped put the town of Gautier on the map. And Kay suspects it's a younger Henry still lumbering about his proud creation. She learned about her ghostly visitor from Henry's granddaughter, who lives next door. The neighbor told Kay the description of the teenage ghost sounded like it could be Henry's daughter at a young age. She lived to be an elderly woman, but the neighbor explained that Henry's daughter had fond memories of her childhood house. Kay feels Henry and his family, who spent almost 50 years in the home, must have been happiest here.
There are people who are here because this is where they want to be. They're not quite ready to go on yet, or they have some unfinished business, but it's not bad things. It feels more like happy things. And I have to admit, our visitors seem to be content.
When the Adams first moved in, they had to accept yet another addition to their family. Their yard man claimed an elderly woman always watched him work from a window. When Kay described the woman to the last owner of the home, he said it was probably his mother, who loved to watch the wildlife from that window. She passed away right before Kay and her husband bought the house. When we returned,
initially it started off with just me, and I would hear someone calling my name.
Voices from the past reach out to the owner of an 1876 Massachusetts home, and that's just the beginning of his adventure into the unknown. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Grant Goody. Strange voices calling out your name. Objects that seem to move from room to room. A hallway so full of ghosts that nobody wants to use it. Any of these would be enough to drive most homeowners away. Put them all together, and you have Jared Joseph's house in Springfield, Massachusetts. Jared has lived in his 1876 home for about 2 years and has found you can get comfortable in a house like this. You just have to get to know who you're sharing it with.
Initially, it started off with just me. And I would hear someone calling my name. I always dismissed it as people walking down the street. It is a city street. It's very busy.
Many old homebuyers say that their walls talk to them. But shortly after moving into his Springfield, Massachusetts home, Jared Joseph says he really did hear his house speaking.
The voices calling my name has been an ongoing thing, not only for myself, but for many family members in my home and friends and guests as well.
Jared and his home didn't start off on a first-name basis. It took 3 months of cleaning and painting before the 1870s home confessed any of its secrets. The first revelation came from a dark corner in the basement.
I had come down to replace the insulation, and that's when I had found a couple keys.
Jared was glad to find that the skeleton keys opened some of the doors in his house. He thinks the discovery also unlocked his home's hidden spirit.
I find some keys, and then all of a sudden all these strange occurrences started taking place.
The first member of Jared's family to be touched by the spirit was a puppy playing in the kitchen. Jared was mystified when he went to retrieve the puppy and found him in an impossibly lofty location.
I had walked into the kitchen and I had opened the door and bent down to call the puppy, and at that time, puppy was nowhere to be found. I proceeded to walk through the home, and the first door, of course, was the dining room door. There was no way on earth that puppy could have got up on that table or in that room unless somebody had brought it.
The puppy's experience heightened Jared's awareness of his home's mysterious atmosphere. Not long after that, he said he became increasingly conscious of an eerie presence in the second-floor hallway.
I had decided to come carry a load of laundry down the hall, and I stopped in my tracks and hesitated, and I thought to myself, oh, this is foolish. I had then turned around to continue down this hallway, and I seen the image of what appeared to be a nun.
The nun's shadow inspired Jared to find out who had lived in the home before him. When he searched the records at a local museum, Jared didn't find evidence that nuns had occupied the house, but he did learn that the home had been built to answer a higher calling. Samuel Giles Buckingham lived in the house and served as reverend for a local church. After Jared studied one photo of the owner, he came face to face with the possibility that Reverend Buckingham may still be tending his flock.
I came walking through the house, feeling my way through, and as I got to this doorway, I had looked up, and what appeared to me was the image of somebody standing outside looking right at me. At the same time that I went to gasp, the clock had started to strike 12, and I must have jumped about 15 feet in the air, and I went running out screaming. It really scared me.
Once the shock of seeing the ghost wore off, Jared said he took comfort from the idea that he was haunted by a pastor. His sense of peace was also strengthened when he received a surprising letter from a previous owner explaining that in the 1940s, 3 nuns had indeed rented the home.
If it was a spirit of a nun in my home, I knew at that point that nothing would be harming me, so I guess I had to share my home with a nun.
With his omens transformed into blessings, Jared feels nothing but reverence for his home and its ghostly occupants. As he continues his restoration efforts, he is now armed with a wing and a prayer. Jared's entire family has been a witness to ghosts in his home. In fact, his mother was one of the first. Not long after he bought the home, she flew in to help work on the house. Jared prepared one of the bedrooms for her visit, but his mother never slept there. It seems that on her first night in the room, she had an overwhelming feeling of being watched. When Jared went to check on her in the morning, his mother had moved to a room that felt more private. When we come back, owners of a 19th century captain's home in North Carolina believe the former owner may be sticking around to indulge in the passions he was denied in his own lifetime.
That hit me with both feet. It was like, oh my gosh, this place might really be haunted.
Stay with us. Welcome back to If Walls Could Haunt. Unfinished business. People who believe their house is haunted often feel their ghosts are fulfilling the dreams and goals they could not complete in their lifetime. Mark Denty and Gail Kinney are convinced that their 1890s bed and breakfast has a permanent guest in the form of the Civil War captain who built the North Carolina house. The captain tried to offer hospitality in his lifetime. Now Mark and Gail are trying to help him complete his mission more than a century later. In 1998, Mark Denty and Gail Kinney were planning for retirement. To start their nest egg, they purchased a Queen Anne bed and breakfast in Candler, North Carolina. But Mark and Gail found their nest was not insulated with feathers. It was filled with tales of mystery.
I heard the door open, and I heard someone go, "You!" And I went, "You back, you." The guy smelled pipe smoke in the air. There was no evidence of anybody being in the house.
Despite living with a few strange sensations, Mark and Gail admit they've always felt at home here.
I have several times, well, more than several times probably, just walk down the hall and say, I love this house.
The warm glow cast by the home's rich woodwork entranced Mark and Gail. But it wasn't until they moved in that photographs of the original owner cast a spell of intrigue.
When we took this place over, we did inherit a few photographs. And, you know, the more you have, the more you want to know.
Mark and Gail dug up the family of Civil War veteran Captain John Hoyt, and they invited his grandchildren to return to their ancestral haunts. When the family visited, they got into the spirit of discovery and shared with Mark and Gail a 1902 dinner menu and stories about how Captain Hoyt would entertain weary travelers at his home.
I understand that he was quite a character, that he was quite an entertainer. There was a hotel right down the road, and the guests at the hotel, he would wine them and dine them, and they would stay until all hours of the night.
The captain wined and dined his visitors with homemade brew. The Engadine Red listed on the menu was crafted from the 100-year-old grapevines and raspberries still on the property. These vintage vines are reminders of the captain's favorite pastime.
From what I understand, he was one of the best winemakers in the Southeast at that time.
But in 1910, the captain's endeavors were stifled when the Prohibition movement came to North Carolina and closed his winery.
They came in, and the captain complied with the rule, and he sat there and cried as each barrel was smashed.
Mark and Gail believe the captain's death 3 days later was not a coincidence.
We like to think that he just died of a broken heart over the destruction of his pastime that he loved so much.
The captain's distilled spirits may be a distant memory, but Mark and Gail think he is still shaken and stirred here. When the photo that sparked their initial interest is compared to a ghostly image in a guest's photo, it would seem the captain is still greeting the home's guests.
He showed me the photograph and he said, "Do you know who this particular picture is in my chest, who that person is?" I saw immediately that it was the captain. There was no way that it couldn't be, because I saw his eyes, and I've looked at this picture several times. And I knew immediately that it was the captain. It made chills run up and down my spine.
But it would be another spine-tingling incident that would truly convince Marg and Gail of the captain's presence. One evening, a couple sleeping in a room known as the captain's room was suddenly roused out of bed. In the middle of the night, they found themselves in the middle of a phantom fest.
We had some people here, and the next morning, the woman was extremely upset because she'd been staying in this room and she heard people laughing and running up and down the stairs. She was the only one that was able to hear it. That was probably about one of the first occurrences that actually made me realize that something was actually happening here.
Happening more than once. Marg and Gail have come to believe that the partying is only the captain playing host. And as long as he is interested in letting the good times roll, they are happy to coexist with the original spirit of the inn and his invisible guests.
We think that they're pretty happy with us because of what we've done with the house. So I think they just have to kind of show us every now and then that they're still here in spirit.
Marg and Gail plan to use the 1902 dinner menu to honor the captain's memory. Their Thanksgiving menu will match that served by the captain a century ago. And while they can't serve his wine, they hope to recapture the spirit of the captain's parties. When we come back, we'll revisit the 1880s Mississippi house we showed you earlier to discover a secret space that is a favorite of the owner's kids and the resident ghost.
He carries a lantern, a blue lantern, and he comes and he goes and he comes and he goes.
Stay with us.
He dropped over into a room that when they described to us, it's really behind a fireplace. And we realized if it was behind a fireplace, it was inside this closet here.
The Adams installed a door in back of the closet to access the hidden room. But they believe their efforts also opened a portal to their ghost's play place, where Henry often burns the midnight oil.
Henry seems to go in and out of this closet on a regular basis. He carries a lantern, a blue lantern, not a red lantern, but a blue lantern. And he comes and he goes and he comes and he goes, and pretty regularly.
Kay suspects Henry might have hidden his valuables in the secret space. All they know for sure is that he's harmless and often just gives them away. Thanks for watching. Remember, every house has a history and maybe a ghost or two. So keep looking for clues to the past hiding behind the walls of your home. I'm Grant Goody.
Sensible Chic pares down the price of a glamorous parlor. Then don't miss our all-new design show, Public Places, Private Spaces. It's all part of Design at 9, Monday night, only on HGTV.